Sifu, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Yesterday when you asked us to do that contemplation, right? So what if like fear arise when you do that contemplation? Because it's like it's like the mind and the, let's say when you're observing somebody talking to you, and then you're observing that the ear is so-called hearing, but it's kind of like as if the mind become an observer, is disconnected with the body. You are just seeing the body as the, so you feel like kind of all of a sudden there's a fear, how do you actually manage that?
So if you experience a bit of fear, in a way that's normal, huh? Yeah. In a way, it means you are really doing it, taking it quite seriously and doing it, not just going through motion. But where does the fear come from? Yeah. In a way, the fear comes from the familiarity that we have with this body, with the notion that all this is I. And when you observe carefully, then you may observe that the functioning is quite almost like autonomous. Yeah. When the conditions are there, then hearing exists. Yeah. When the conditions arise, then thinking exists. Yeah. Not so much an I-driven process. Yeah. But don't take my word for it. Try observing where the fear comes from. Whether there's an I that's fearing. Okay. Xin Hui writes for the exercise is the, okay, we take a photo first.
Okay, we're taking a photo. 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Okay. Xin Hui writes, for the exercise yesterday, I interpret that the main purpose is for us to reduce 我执, knowing that what our senses and mind experience or interpret are all dependent on conditions, working organs that can detect signals, intact nervous system that can relay signals, brain that can I suppose you meant interpret, interpret signals, and the mind that can mix meanings of the signals, and not by a single entity I. Yes and no. Yeah. So I have a question. How many of you agree with this or came to the same conclusion? How many of you came to the same conclusion as Xin Hui did? It's not a bad conclusion. So sometimes for meditation, I will ask students to do this. Or rather, I will ask students this question. The question is, how do you know that you are breathing? I'll ask students this question. Usually in the first lesson for a new class, I'll ask students this question. How do you know that you are breathing? And then they will sometimes say, living things breathe, so I should be breathing. Yeah. So so do you all agree? Living things breathe, so I should be breathing. So that's how we know. There's nothing wrong with that statement. It's absolutely correct. So this is known as knowing through inference. Yeah. So because living things breathe, and since I'm alive, so I should be breathing. So this is called inference. But the question on breathing is also very interesting because we are always breathing, ma. But how do we know that we are breathing? Yeah, usually we don't know also. Yeah, we logically know that we are breathing by inference. So that's one way. Another way is, I told them, put your hand on the floor, and then I asked them a series of questions. Is the floor hard or soft, rough or smooth, warm or cold, stable or unstable? Then they will answer accordingly. And I then ask them, how do you know? Then they say, my hand is on the floor, I can feel it. Yeah. But there will be some students who don't want to put their hand on the floor because they are trying to figure out what Sifu is trying to ask us to do. And without putting their hand, then they say, of course, it's hard. So I say, again, if you don't put your hand on the floor, that's inference. Yeah. Or that's based on past memory. Yeah. But if you put your hand on the floor and you answer those questions, that's directly observing it. Yeah. You observe, you feel directly how the floor is. So the Xinhui is quite Xinhui is what Xinhui wrote. I suspect is inference. I suspect because I think most of us are not able to observe the nervous system. Xinhui, are you able to observe the nervous system already? You cannot, right? Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I say the answer is correct and wrong. Yeah. Yes and no. Yeah. So the purpose, in a way, we can say that is to help us reduce 我执, the attachment to the self. Yeah. Yeah. So, but in a way, it's not, because in a way, it's for us to examine the very premise of ourself. Yeah. And so by examining the premise of the self, you realize that there is no premise for what we usually think of as self. And thereby, the attachment goes away. But Sifu, isn't that what Xinhui said? Reduce 我执. Yeah. So this is the thing about, so there's the attachment to self, right? Okay. So attachment to self. Yeah. Attachment to self. And then, okay, use a different one. Today got another one. Went to donate blood, now got a new one. So, now let's say this is our self, okay? This is our attachment to self. And this causes the attachment to self. Can understand? Okay, this maybe this is not a good. Okay, so this is our grasping. Okay, this is our wrong idea about the self. Okay, this is our wrong idea, and this wrong idea lead to the attachment to the self. So if we say we directly try to reduce the attachment to the self without changing the wrong view, this cannot work. Yeah, can you understand? You cannot directly reduce the attachment to the self without changing the wrong view. But wrong view can be, so inference is not totally bad also. Inference is using contemplation to reflect, to think. Yeah. So that's one way you can contemplate on it. And then, but it can only go up to a certain point. Yeah. Because, for example, what Xinghui mentioned, right? What Xinghui mentioned is what all of us can understand from science also, right? But scientists may not necessarily have the wisdom of no self. Yeah. And there are two reasons that I think is why scientists don't necessarily have the wisdom of no self. Number one, a lot of people learn mathematics, but depending on how you use the mathematics, you may become an accountant or an engineer. So just learning mathematics alone doesn't guarantee that you become an engineer or accountant for that matter. Yeah. So just because someone learned this sequence of understanding, it doesn't necessarily lead to the realization of no self, because it depends on how you understand it, how you use it. Yeah. Just as when the Buddha teach us about the different parts of the body, his aim is not for us to become doctors. So we don't become doctors. Yeah. And anyway, it is a very, in a way, simplified model. Only 36 parts, right? First year medical student, I had a friend who was was in dentistry. So she shared with me, just in brief, some of the diagrams for human anatomy. Just the leg itself, our leg itself, we think of our leg as like one leg, 1 feet, 1 foot. But the foot itself has so many different bone, and they have different names for every single bone. So I recall, yeah, my sis is nodding her head because she took bio last time. Yeah, it's crazy, So if you compare just first year medical student human anatomy and just take the foot, yeah, with just 1 foot, the number of parts is more than what the Buddha described about the human body. Yeah. Surely the Buddha with more wisdom should be able to tell us more parts, right? Yeah. But he didn't. Yeah. Instead, he focused on another part of it, another angle of it, which is how none of this part is pleasant. None of this part is pure. Yeah. But all these parts are filthy, is not not pleasant, not beautiful, the way we think of the body. Yeah. If you were to sit down with any medical students or doctors for that matter, nurses, and you ask them, is blood disgusting? They'll say yes. Is the flesh disgusting? Yes. If you ask them about every single part, including the bone, everything, they will say, yeah, this, But when they are learning medical science, they don't think in this way, because that's not the purpose. You see so this is the very important angle. They may learn the parts, but because they don't direct it towards the impurities or aspect of it, and perhaps they shouldn't, because otherwise, can you imagine you go for the surgery, and then the doctor halfway, oh, you're so disgusting. Then all the operation failed. Why? Because the doctor found it too disgusting to continue. Yeah, so it serves a purpose. Likewise, the Buddha's teachings serve a purpose. And so likewise, like what is described here can be seen as part of neuroscience. Yeah. So neuroscientists examine the functioning of the senses and the nervous system and so on for a very directed purpose. Yeah. But they may not then come to a conclusion that there is no single agent involved. Yeah, like the Buddha observed. So this contemplation by itself may not lead to no self, because this is following the medical approach. Yeah. So an important question But an important statement that Xin added in, which is from Buddhism, is and not by a single entity I. Yeah. So that's why I say yes and no. Yeah. Yeah. So if we were in classes, I sometimes also bring in science to supplement the contemplation, because science is something that we are all aware of, right? And is empirically provable, right? So we can use that, but the angle, very important. No? But the second part is that because in the exercise, it's not meant to be simply a contemplation. Yeah. So in the Buddhist tradition, when we develop wisdom, there are three stages, right? 闻思修, yeah, 闻思修三会. So hearing, then contemplation, and then cultivation. So when we hear about the teachings the Buddha described and so on and so forth, that's just hearing of his wisdom. Then you go and contemplate on it. So what Xinghui wrote down is similar to contemplation. Yeah. And so you can use the concept, whether using medical science approach, yeah, or using the Buddhist approach of looking at the interaction. Yeah, you can also even use philosophy. Yeah, I'll touch on it just a bit in a while. But ultimately, the practice part, which is where you go and observe directly. Yeah, which is the exercise I give you. That's why I said yesterday a bit harder. Yeah, yeah. So when suddenly you hear a sound, this is actually easy. I can tell you this is actually the easy part. The difficult part is, as my sister mentioned, when someone is talking to you, are you able to, at that moment, observe just hearing? So, sis, when you did the exercise, are you able to reply to them?
This kind of when this observation happen, right, it is when I am very mindful, right? But then there will be like a delay. There's a delay in the reaction. So that's when the kind of like the feeling of oops, the mind is not, it's normally it's so intuitive, and then all of a sudden you feel like the mind is
A bit
how come it's not disconnected. So that's why the fear comes about.
Yeah. So similar questions from myself, from other fellow monks and nuns came up in the monastery also. We have this question of, if you are to do contemplation, yeah, or go and observe, then in our day-to-day interaction with people, we may not be able to function. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so this question comes up only if you really try the exercise. If you don't try, then you have other kind of question. It's a different question. So based on the questions, we know whether to what level you try. Yeah. Yeah. So but don't be frightened of. But having said that, if you are, like, for example, when you're working, it can become a bit disruptive because people will be wondering, this one 慢三拍这个 how come like talk to her like she's just staring blankly. Then suddenly, oh yeah, yeah, about that numbers. Yeah. And that's the thing. Normally, when we are interacting with people, we are we are not having that awareness or mindfulness. Yeah. So we are intuitively experiencing everything as though there's a I. Yeah. We are identifying with all this as I directly. And in the same way as you mentioned, usually you are able to just respond immediately. In the same way, that's why when people scold us, we can't help but immediately respond with anger. Because we identify with the statement and everything as I. So Xinghui just now replied, agree via inference. Shifu, not sure if you have explained the rationale of Wednesday, etc., about why we list down more of the person's bad points and than good points. Yeah. So separately, my sister had a chat with me. But how about the rest? Do you actually remember the exercise the other day to list down the good points and the bad points? Good points just list down 3, and then bad points list down 10. Did you try that exercise? Huh? Nobody try. Only my sister tried. Show of hands, how many of you didn't try? Didn't manage to try? Don't say you all didn't try. I didn't manage to try. Most of you all didn't manage to try. Sometimes I know it's not your fault also. Because after Sifu give exercise, then Sifu say very interesting things. Then you all laugh. Then after that, totally forgot. Okay, so today, redo that exercise. Redo the exercise. And for those who didn't do the observing of the breath or on the observing of the interaction, when you see something, hear something, and so on, but you all did the inference reflection, try at least a few times in the whole day. Yeah, don't have to do it continuously, okay? But at least try for a few times. Go and observe. When you see something, who is seeing? When you hear something, who is hearing? Yeah, hearing is very is perhaps more impactful in a sense, because seeing it is how do I put it? Seeing in a way is somewhat, you can say, passive interaction, because the light is always coming on. You don't really have to do anything. You just open your eye, ding. Whereas hearing, if someone talk to you, it's an active engagement with you, right? So try observing it. But you can try using seeing also, or try the exercise. Okay. So if you didn't do both exercise, then do both lah. Quack says heart stops, breathing stops, then die. Yes. Quack always make statements of truth that is to the point. Don't talk so much, Sifu. Very simple. Heart stop, breathing stop, then die. Yeah, I like having Quack in my class because she always helped to summarize my teaching. I talk for 1 hour, people still figuring out what I'm talking about. Then she just make one statement and then it fully summarized. Okay, so try the exercise. Okay.